Peace and many blessings, peace and black power, peace and liberation, and all of that beautiful, beautiful stuff. What's going on, y'all? It's your girl, Auree, and we are back here with our second go around of the Reparations series for this February, right? In recognition of African Liberation Month, as we also know, Black History Month, and also, just for our people to have forward-moving conversations, right? So, want to welcome y'all in. Peace and love to everybody that's joining on so far. We're going to get started in just a bit. Today, we will be having a different segment, so before we start today, and before we go into what exactly is happening today, I do want to give you guys some background information. So, as you know, we are the African Black Coalition, and we, serve Black students all over the Cal State and UC systems, and are connecting with those who are also, within high schools, community colleges, and et cetera. So really, making sure that we have this pool and that we have this community, right, of each other as Black students, African students, not just in the U.S., but in the diaspora, and learning how we can, really build these relationships. And this month, we're focusing on the topic of reparations. So the reason why we're focusing on this is because the African Black Coalition is currently undergoing campaign work to push for reparations in the state of California and beyond that as well. This is a national campaign, and so with that being said, we have to make sure we are having constant conversations, and that, we are, making sure that we understand what exactly reparations is and why we still need to continue to address why African and Black people need to be demanded reparations, right? And I've said a lot already. We'll be saying way more in today's live, but I'm just turn a little bit of music up. Got some soft jazz playing in the background. And today is also a very special day for ABC's series, because we're actually having a special guest come on today. But the brother's name is Wisdom Cole. So Wisdom Cole is from the NAACP. He's going to tell us a little bit more about himself and his work. And, just a little bit more about his studies and his, things that he's learned in regards to reparations work, and a plethora of different things. So we're very excited for this conversation today. We've got some dings going in the background. Sorry about that. So, like I said before, I see some new people hopping on, joining. What's going on, everybody? Peace and love. I see our brother Wisdom has just joined us, so I will invite you in, or you can actually request to join whenever you are ready. I was just telling the people about you and what's going to happen today. So, all right, y'all, Brother Wisdom is here, so we are excited. We're going to let him in, right? And we're going to get this show on the road. Yes. So just give it a moment. Yes.
Hey, what's going on?
Nothing much, brother. How you feeling today?
I'm doing good. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Happy that I see your face. You got some campaign work in the background. You got to let the people
know it. Look, you got to see it. Look.
Right.
We ready for this conversation.
We ain't even got to say nothing. That's all you got to do. That's it, y'all. The poster in the background, that's all. Nah, but appreciate you, Brother Wisdom, for being here today, on time, ready to speak to the people. Before all else, I was just kind of getting into what we're doing today. So for the people that just hopped on or hopping on, welcome to, again, ABC's Reparations series for the February. And not celebration, right, necessarily, but really to acknowledge why this conversation is needed during, not just Black History Month or African Liberation Month, as we like to call it, but really because these conversations are constructive to our liberation, right? And they also address the necessity of why we are even still asking for reparations in the 21st century, right? And so we're going to go a little bit more into that today, but I'm gonna stop talking, right? And I want to give Wisdom the chance to introduce himself, a little bit about your work and what you hope to kind of bring to this conversation today.
One, I just gotta appreciate you for the invitation. I am honestly so blessed to be a part of this network, to be a part of the African Black Coalition, to be part of that legacy. As you said, my name is Wisdom Cole, and I currently serve as the national director for the NAACP Youth and College Division. But I got my start at ABC, right? Honestly, today I've been going down nostalgia road, just everything. I did live with UC Santa Cruz a bit earlier, and just thinking about the fundamental skills I learned as an organizer, working with the African Black Coalition. In 2014, I actually got to organize the African Black Coalition Conference at UC Santa Cruz. And we had some of the dopest speakers, right? We had Bobby Seale, we had Angela Davis, we had Atala Shabazz, we had just amazing alumni, just folks who came from across the country just to be there to support the work we were doing. We were talking about reimagining Black activism because at that period of time, it kind of felt like things were stagnant, things were stale. You know, people were not as inspired as they should have been. And this was 8 years ago. And so we really took that as an opportunity to transform what this looks like. We were like, how do we get the biggest speakers, the biggest names, the biggest folks who are going to inspire our people, but also have a good time too. So, you know, it's honestly a privilege to be here and to be speaking with you about something I'm so passionate about. One of the priority campaigns of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People is student debt cancellation, right? Is making sure that we cancel student debt because we recognize the impact that it has on Black people. And so I'm super excited to get in this conversation. I'm super happy because this is also fundamental political education. Like y'all be doing and making sure that people understand what's up, what's what, and that's what's needed to, you know, develop any amazing organizer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, I want to touch on the fact like that you said, you know, this is fundamental political education, right? As you know, ABC is about connecting and building with different, you know, people throughout the diaspora and the nation and, you know, having fun as well. But political education is the primary basis of, you know, ABC's work, right? Because we know we have a mission when we have campus visits, or we have a mission when you go to ABC. It's not just about let's have fun and let's function, but let's have fun and function and then build with that, right?
Exactly.
If you bring that up. And, you know, I'm very excited. So we're going to jump right into it because we have a lot of things to, you know, address today, really dive deep into. But before I load, so we're going to start with like kind of just the, you know, the primeval questions, right? So first, you know, I want to know from you, you know, when you think of, you know, the word reparations, you know, what exactly do you think about, right? Let's just kind of start with that basic framework and get your ideas going with that.
You know, the first thing when I think about reparations is it's about damn time. Like it was way overdue, right? Way overdue. You know, when we think about the history of Black people in America, we think about what has happened to our people, right? We are owed an historical debt, right? So much has happened to our folks where we've been promised certain things and things haven't come through. Like, you know, we know that people promise stuff, and don't come through on it. And so when people say, oh, why aren't people voting? Why aren't people doing this? You've constantly lied to a generation of people for years and years and years. What do you think they're going to do, right? So when I think about reparations, it's really thinking about like there is literally historical documents. There are deep records, right? You know, you think about even some of our prestigious universities and how they were literally built on the backs of slaves, right? There is so much owed to Black America and Black people throughout the nation and Black people throughout the diaspora. You know, we need to make sure that this happens in this moment in time. Especially as we continue to go through a, you know, global pandemic, as we go through the different issues from day to day, like in this moment in time, there is an opportunity for the government to actually do right by people or do something close, right? Because you can't take back the lives, you can't take back all the trauma and things that happened to our folks throughout that time, but you can help us create a path forward and have a better future, right? And so, you know, reparations is something that is a must, it's needed. And there's definitely different ways that people are executing and exercising a way to funnel resources into the Black community.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, you know, I like how you ended like with the fact that, you know, people are looking for different resources about how to go about allocating reparations or distributing reparations, right? And there's really this this constant talk of, okay, so if we get reparations, right, what exactly does that look like? And that really wants to, you know, leads me to my next question as well with reparations. Or what does that look like for you, right? So we kind of understand that, you know, student debt is a part of this conversation, right? As far as, you know, like let's cancel the student debt, like let's let that be part of the plan for reparations. But there are so many different other factors, right? We have like medical reparations, which, you know, people are also, well, we have, you know, college reparations. There's so many different, you know, factors.
Land reparation.
Right, right. So for you, you know, when it comes to just like the basic, like, okay, reparations first, what are like the top three? Let's start with there. Like, what are your top three kind of like reparations, like, what does it look like for you, or what needs to be addressed first?
Yeah, so for me, the like I said before, the priority campaign for me right now is around student debt cancellation, and I recognize that that is a big part of the debt, right? We have research that shows that canceling student debt at a minimum of 50,000 or more would actually reduce the racial wealth gap. And so there are so many advocates and researchers and professors and folks who've spoken about this over and over again, to deaf ears, but recognizing that this is an opportunity to actually make sure that there are resources there. Like I said, I'm thinking about land reparation, right? What is the land that we own, right? What is the actual ability for us to determine our own destiny, create our own goods, create our own food sources, things of that nature, because we've been able to be trapped in the system where we become so dependent on a cycle, when we're so dependent on other people in terms of our own freedom. And so we can get the money, we can get the cash, but I want the land, right? I want to be able to grow my own food. I want to be able to know how, that farm to table feel. I want to make sure I know that and feel that, because I recognize how important it is for us to know exactly where things come from. People lie to us all the time. People cheat us all the time. And so we have to be able to develop a system where we can depend on ourselves, depend on our community for what's needed. And so those are the two big things when I think about reparations. Recognizing that I also think about this historical debt a lot. I used to be a teacher, and we used to talk about this idea of what does the American education system owe to young Black people, right? Because oftentimes when you're looking at our inner city schools, we're looking at the schools that we go to, right? The educational level, or teachers, right? You have teachers who are coming fresh out with no experience in the classroom, talking about they're trying to make a difference, but don't really know what they're doing, right? We deserve better. We deserve prepared teachers, trained teachers, people who have actually studied this and prepared to take this on and understand our community and come from our community, right? There's research that shows that young kids, all kids, prefer Black teachers than other teachers, right? Let's make sure we're investing in Black teachers and putting that back into the classroom, right? And so thinking about what is the educational debt, what is the land debt, what is the economic debt, all those really fall into, schemas of reparation for me.
Absolutely. And I want to also, I kind of want to piggyback on what you said, ask another question, right? And in regards to how you said in the beginning, where when it comes to reparations, there's a lot of this distrust, because, people will ask, African people and Black people, why do you, how do I word it? But, we're like, you're still asking for this thing, you know what I mean? And we understand that this is because of a historical legacy that has happened, why we're asking for reparations. However, to work somewhat with the government, right? Because there's been this bill that was introduced, HR 40, which for some people, right, you hear African people, oh, we don't mess with the government, because of the fact that we're asking for reparations because of what was done to us on behalf of the system. So how are we going to work with the bill, right, that was introduced by you guys and doesn't necessarily include us in the process? So to kind of like add to that, do you see like HR 40 being somewhat of a tool, or do you, as an African person with the trust that you have in the government, see this as, okay, doesn't have any help, but this is not going to really get us anywhere? Do you have any thoughts about HR 40?
Well, it's mixed, right? Because even when you talk about reparation is such a charged word when you think about politics, right? People might not even know what reparations is, but the second you say it, automatically they're like, "Oh, you giving out my money? You taking my money? You taking it out of my pocket, right? Like for what? For something that I didn't do, something that my ancestors did, right?" That's how people perceive the word right away, right? And so part of it is really unpacking language and making sure that people are part of that process in terms of what it looks like to actually pass this bill, right? I remember when I first moved to DC, 2018, 2019, there was a lot of discussions around reparations. We were going to the floor, up to Capitol Hill, just to hear from congressional members about their opinions. You had the Ta-Nehisi Coates coming up to the Hill talking about reparations and the need for it and why this is important, and people sharing their stories. But also, recognizing the importance of having people a part of that process, right? People have to co-author the bills that we are putting forth, right? If they're just coming from our elected leaders, they're not being informed by the people on the ground who are most impacted by it. And so, I think that this conversation of reparations definitely is very polarizing, but I definitely think that there are ways for us to build Black political power to ensure that we put the power in the right people's hands so we can make decisions, right? It may not be our senators. It may not be our elected leaders. I really think it's people like you and me. We have to make sure that we set up systems so that we get access to those resources.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. I like that answer. And with that, I want to go back into this focus on student debt, right? So we've been seeing some statistics that have been surfacing on, like, social media and things like that, which we always want to check our sources whenever we see anything on social media before we take it at face value. However, ABC has done their research, and according to the Education Data Initiative, right, as of 2022, Black and African American college graduates owe an average of 25,000 more in student loan debt than white college graduates. So, why is there such a dramatic difference in financial health and wealth resources available across communities, right? And for some people, that may be, oh, we know why, but I want you to kind of really dig deep into why is this, and where is this rooting from, and can you kind of elaborate on that?
Right. So I think you have to understand our culture, our people, right? As a people, oftentimes we have to pay a black tax, right? A lot of folks, a lot of our people in our community take care of our elders, take care of our family, come from families that have a weaker economic basis, right? And so we end up having to take out more loans than our white counterparts because we are starting at a weaker base, right? Take it back to the Jim Crow South, right? All those effects still affect us today. And so for a black student going to college, they're facing all these years of the Jim Crow South and racism and oppression, as well as the increasing costs of college, right? These are all things that are impacting them, as well as the things that operate in our lives. I remember for me, I had to send money back home. I had to make sure every dollar that I made went into paying my bills. I was working to try not to take any loans, but I had to take loans because I needed it to survive. And then for me to even navigate the system, even when I thought I had it, like I was an RA for my second year in college, and I was like, all right, let's go mediate some of the costs. The government said, that's income, even though I was working for it. And then I got less grants and scholarship the next year, and so I had to take out mad loans just to stay in school. So, we have this interesting predicament and condition and circumstance where we are just not able to have access to wealth the way that white people do, plain and simple, right? And Joe Biden keeps talking about, well, if I cancel student debt, what about the white male at Harvard University? He's not taking out loans. People with more wealth don't take out loans. People who have less wealth, who come from low economic backgrounds, people who are from people of color communities, right? Like people who come from the places that we come from, are the ones who are taking out loans. We are the ones being most affected by it. And so stop talking about those people, right? Those people aren't in the equation. It's about us, right? It's about making sure that it's good for not just even our community, but for all communities. Because we know through history, anytime you've liberated and supported Black people, everybody has benefited. So I don't see where the problem's at. But this is why I do the work that I do and fight and argue and make sure that they hear our voices. So, I really recognize, where we're coming from and the places in which we struggle.
I hear that for sure. And this really sparked something within me as well, as far as you saying, this, there should be no reason why we're even asking the question, why are we owed this, right? Why are black students, period, African students, period, are not being owed this debt? And it makes me think about, in regards to the HR 40 bill, because it sounds like, from what you're saying, okay, it doesn't necessarily have to be the senators, or right, are those who, are in these certain seats that pushes this fight forward, that are pushes for these reparations forward, but we still have to somehow use what has already been made and do something with this, what I'm hearing. So with that being said, it's like, okay, well, in regards to HR 40, how do we place reparations, right, in student debt within this? And how do we really, like, in this in the context of where we are now, since Biden is talking about student debt, address, okay, we have HR 40, right, in regards to us, when we're as organizers, right, we are growing and developing organizers. So we're talking about what's already being done with HR 40. Okay, how can we talk about reparations in the student debt, which Biden is talking about? So I'm bringing this up because it makes us think about the leverage that we have now with what already is being currently talked about, and how we can use which already has been introduced, i.e. the HR 40 bill. And there's also other things that have been introduced, not just in California, but like places like Chicago, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But I really appreciate you bringing up these points. And so with that, right, you also talked about loans, and not necessarily, for African and Black people, we know we're not only taking out student loans, right? We have responsibilities at school and within academia, and then we have things that we're facing at home. And we're talking about, low income, working class Black students that are paying already so much just to try to get into the first year of their semester at college, are having to maybe worry about, or their families worry about, other debt. So with that being said, in your opinion, what other forms of debt besides student debt, serve as barriers for access for African and Black people? If you can kind of elaborate on these things, we can bring it in the conversation.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest one, credit card debt, right? I remember going to college and walking through the Corey Plaza and all these credit card companies being like, hey, sign up for a credit card, sign up for a credit card. And then it's like, all right, when you're in particular situation of turmoil, that's what you turn to, right? I remember, I was a junior in college. I moved off campus because I was like, I'm gonna move off campus. I got this dope internship, let's get it, it's paying me money. And then I lost the internship because I failed a class. And so I only had enough money to pay for rent, and I literally had to work the worst job in my life. It was a telephone outreach program where I had to call people to donate to the university. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing. And I was literally, going into our BSU office, eating chips like a snack a day just to make it through the weeks, right, until that happened. And so then people end up turning to credit cards and swiping, and it's like, oh, it's okay, we can do this, we can do this. And then you graduate and you got to pay that back, right? And so I think thinking about that, making sure that there are not predatory, practices that people are putting towards young Black students, particularly when it comes to credit card debt. Oftentimes our community may not be as educated in terms of financial literacy, and I think that's definitely a trap that's put in front of us to get into. And even when we talk about like student debt, a lot of people say like financial literacy is the key to unpacking student debt. I agree, like everybody needs to be financial literate, but there's a lot of work that the government can do to make sure that we get what's ours, right? I'm thinking about people who are funneling resources in their communities in alternative ways. One of my good friends, Sixto Cancel, he works for this organization called Think of Us. He's the CEO of the organization called Think of Us. And he works for he talks about foster care youth, advocating for foster care youth, and recognizes that half of all foster care youth, come from Black homes. And so he's working to make sure that they have resources. And that is a form of reparations. They don't necessarily know it, but that's a form in which he's been funneling money into the Black community, because Black people end up living with their aunties, uncles, grandpas, grandpas, these, external folks who might not necessarily be our direct mother and father or parents, but these are people who are taking care of us. And so literally there is legislation and policy that supports people who are living with elders in their community, right? We have to think about ways in which we can use the system to our advantage and plug and funnel resources into our community, right? I think I wholeheartedly believe that electoral politics is a tool to get what we need to determine our own destiny.
Okay, so with that, right? Because I like how you brought up the part about financial literacy, and I think like there's, how would I would say this, like you hear people saying, okay, there's those that are like, you can make it out the mud, right? You can may start a business and work your way to somewhere and pay out this debt. However, I think there's also a line of thinking where this is somehow incorrect, because there's situations where someone they can't quite literally have the resources to start the business that they quote unquote need to be successful. So we have gurus and people going around saying, well, if you just manifest into reality what you want, that's not necessarily how the system is built, right? And I think that it goes to your point of why there is this need for governmental assistance, and somehow they can make room for us to get the reparations, or at least the resources we need that are forms of reparations in regards to resources, because we know that there are situations where families cannot just necessarily just start a business and it's going to be successful the next day. And you're also making false pretenses that businesses are successful overnight. It can take years to make a first million, if that. What I'm
Exactly.
saying?
And that's the lie that they tell for why they don't want to cancel debt. Well, you go to college, you graduate, you get a good job, right? You get paid a lot of money. You're not looking at, where people are starting off. Just because they start making a lot of money after graduate college doesn't mean that they have caught up to their white counterparts, right? You have people who are starting, who are able to make mistakes, who are able to, like, if I tell you the stuff I saw in college, it'd be wild. We'd be here all night. But people are able to do certain things and have access, able to do whatever they want, fail, and restart their life. Join daddy your mommy's company and be good. Where we really have to get it out of the money. Even when you are at a good basis, even when you get a good job, there's still this barrier. There's still this depth between our people and white people. Like it's deep, and it's proven through research.
Absolutely. So, I know we on fire right now, what I mean? We ain't even halfway. We almost halfway through, but we ain't even halfway through, y'all. So, in regards to credit card debt, right, which is a really big thing too. And I also wanted to, bring up that this is very vital too in regards to student loan debt and credit debt. We hear a lot of stories that may be like horror stories, right? Where either someone's trying to purchase their first home or their first car, and there's barriers because their credit is already messed up before they really even started building their credit, right? And so I think that's a very important key to to really think about in regards to reparations, right? Because there is, a cumulative debt. And one thing I remember, I was having a conversation with an elder about what their idea was of reparations, and at first she was kind of like, well, I don't we don't really need reparations, like because I think older generations have a certain type of feeling because they've been through the fact that it's been years since they were owed anything, so they're just like, at this point, what does it matter? But then she brought up like, well, if we did have reparations, like our our student debt was the one thing that she brought up, and just credit debt too, because she's like, if we just had that alleviated where we're at now, because they have a thriving family business, we would have a pretty good standpoint with the money we have in the business, and we can reinvest it. But because we have this debt we still have to worry about, then we have to address that. So I really want students primarily to really sit and think about when you get a credit card, like what are the implications that come with that? What is the responsibility?
It's the debt to income ratio, right?
Yeah.
Don't matter how much money you have, if you have rising debt that's occurring and there's interest on it and people are making money off it, debt to income ratio, right? And that's what's not equal. The debt to income ratio is not the same.
I hear you. Absolutely. And so with that, what exactly would erasing debt do for African and Black people, and how does canceling it as an act, a redress, restitution for Black people? So we kind of already touched on that, but if you want to kind of go further into some other things that you didn't get to bring up the first time, you can elaborate on how this would affect us.
Yeah, most definitely. So, in the student debt cancellation space and advocacy space, when I got started in this work and really thinking about what does student debt cancellation mean, we argued over, what number should we be asking for? Like, what is the number? What is the price? How much it is? If you remember from 2020, right, when Biden was on the campaign trail, one of the major promises he said to all of America is that he would cancel student debt at a minimum of $10,000 for all qualifying loan borrowers, as well as HBCUs and MSIs serving institutes, right? And so those are some key factors, right? Thinking about our HBCU grads, our people who are there, the people who are at minority serving institutes, right? Those are key places where our people go to learn and grow and become the amazing leaders they are today. And so even in that number, we're like, that's not high enough, right? When you look at the research, a minimum of 50,000 must be canceled to make a significant difference for the Black community, right? I got 30,000 at least. I know a bunch of people who have more. We know that Black graduates, end up graduating with a minimum or an average of $53,000 in student debt. And so if we really are trying to make a difference, we need to do that. And that just doesn't only help Black people, it helps all people, right? It impacts it changes the lived circumstances, conditions, and it also reduces the racial wealth gap. It's an opportunity to give people, discretionary funds that they can use to help boost the economy, right? Think about this opportunity, and you talked about this earlier, right? The opportunity to become a homeowner, to become a small business owner, to do that. I remember in 2019 when Robert Smith canceled student debt for the Morehouse graduates of 2019. That changed their lives, right? The government gave a bunch of universities money, Biden gave a bunch of universities money, and really only HBCUs, I think it was a list of 15 or more HBCUs, they used that money to either cancel or eliminate some parts of debt for students. And watching the videos of students see that happen changed their lives. Their future forever is different, right? And so, thinking about this opportunity, it's really the opportunity to have a new perspective, have a new horizon, have a new future, have an opportunity to really, again, back to it. And I keep saying it because I learned it at ABC. We're doing this work to have the opportunity to determine our own destiny. When we're in this society, when we're in this world, how do we have the opportunity to be forced into certain things, certain labor, certain industries, because we can't do it, right? Let me bring it back to the government. Majority of employees by the government who do nonprofit public service are Black people, right? These are the people who have the most amount of debt. Black women are the most educated people in America. Black women carry a disproportionate amount of debt, right? The people who are upholding this country, the people who are constantly and still being built on their backs are saying that, well, you still got to pay us, and you still got to work for us, and you still got to do all these things and pay your debt. Okay? and we ain't gonna give you nothing for it. Okay, like it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up, right? So, something that I believe fundamentally is that student debt is a crisis, and a crisis begins and a crisis ends. And so, in this moment in time, Biden, the administration, Congress, all these people who have this power have the opportunity to end this, right? Overwhelming amount of majority of congressional members support student debt cancellation. When people like Tiffany D. Lofton and a lot of my homies who started this work literally said, when they went on Capitol Hill and said cancel student debt, they're like, "You're crazy. What? That's impossible." Right? People were getting arrested for sitting in at Sally Mae and boycotting and all that stuff. It was wild. But now we're at an opportunity where it's a reality. Like, let's make it happen.
Absolutely. And I really love that you brought that in, right? Because it makes me think about the aspect of liberation, right? We always talk about the fact that regardless of what's happening politically, we align with liberation, right, for our people. And this really is a sign of the active movement of what's possible, that makes us feel liberated. And that means that, the movement aspect. I remember as you were talking and bringing this up, I had a thought cross my mind about like last year. I'm like, we could really cancel this. You know what I'm saying? Like student debt. And I remember having conversations with friends of mine, like at this point, like we have so much support. Like you said, we have support from so many groups of people, right, that are in alignment with student debt, because we already know this doesn't just, this affects Black people at a higher rates, but we know this affects like everybody, right? Those who are at least working class people from different backgrounds, that no matter what, you have to work to pay this off if you don't have a scholarship of some sort. And I really do agree and in line with that, because at the end of the day, it's the power of the people over the power of anybody that's in that office, because they do things that we do, because you know what I mean, the decisions are ultimately made by the people. And I think that we really should continue to focus our attention on how exactly organizing wise and strategically that is to be played. I think places like ABC in collaboration with NAACP are great ways to start. And so I really thank you for this conversation so far. But nevertheless, we want to kind of keep diving deep into this. So that we know that the NAACP hosts weekly discussions on student debt. What important information is included within that segment, or what are some things that you guys constantly bring up, or some key points during your weekly discussions that you want to bring here to ABC today?
Yeah, so every Thursday or every other Thursday, we host an HBCU Takeover Thursday, right, where we are emphasizing and pushing for HBCU leaders around the country who are doing so much work to make sure that we cancel student debt, right? We think about, Black borrowers, but we also think about the fact that HBCUs are also at another level, which are being taken, past where we're at, where they're taking on even more debt, right? And being underserved as well. And so we want to recognize that there's an opportunity to hit the mark, to hit the niche, and make sure that we are advocating for our HBCUs. And so we feature different HBCU leaders who are doing different work, who are talking about the effects of student debt on their lives day-to-day basis. But we're also talking to HBCU alumni who are working and developing amazing organizations that work to cancel student debt every single day. We're talking with them, engaging with them about what type of strategies can we use to ensure that we make this happen. There's been a really big storytelling campaign that we've been a part of nationwide, where we want to capture different stories, and we want to make sure that our elected officials hear from us. When I first got my job, where I actually got promoted to National Director of the Youth and College Division for the NAACP, one of the very first meetings I had was with the Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona. And I came to him with all the facts. I was telling him about how student debt affects Black people. And he's like, "What's your story? Like, how does student debt affect you?" And I was kind of guard, like, "Oh, snap. Like, I'm here. There's a meeting. We talking about the facts, what's happening." But he wanted to hear my story. And he wanted to hear the story of Black youth across America and how it impacted them. And so the work we've been doing in collaboration and with that IG Live series has particularly been about collecting stories, right? Building a Black narrative, recognizing that there's so many different people who are affected by student debt in different ways. We're talking about Black farmers. We're talking about Black people who started in college but didn't graduate. We're talking about Black nurses. We're talking about Black folks in the arts and industry. Every facet of Blackness, because we know that Blackness is so diverse. We need to engage with all the different stories and how it's impacting people, because our stories matters, our story changes our lives, and our stories actually have the impact necessary to create the change.
Absolutely, absolutely. And representation is key, and we really appreciate you guys giving this weekly, because there are students that may not, we may not see that, or they may not know that resource is there. So, making a commitment to that education, right, of why we need to have these sessions so you guys understand what's happening, but also collecting our stories, right? Because that's the primary thing. Like we can tell you exactly what's happening within our families and our situations, because we know we have to work and either take an extra job or, you know, do something, you know, some other thing. Let's do DoorDash or whatever our side hustles and things of that nature are. These are things we have to do in order to make sure we're sustained. However, this is not something that we should be having to do in regards to the fact that there's so much work that, you know, our ancestors and even now that we're doing extraneous amount of work to even be in this position that we are today. So, you know, I really appreciate you bringing that up. And, you know, nextly, I want not nextly. That was not the correct word. Sorry, I'm thinking about.
You good? You good?
Yeah, appreciate. But you know, I want to talk about how strongly, you know, do you support or oppose, right, the following measures about reparations for Black people that are currently surfacing in the U.S. So some of those things are like, you know, lasting impacts of enslavement and segregation, and the kind of like addressing institutional racism, things of reparations programs. You know, so I kind of want to like just pick your brain on different measures or things that you've been hearing in regards to reparations, and if you align with those, or you're like, I don't know if that's really reparations or not. Like, what are some things you've been hearing in this fight you've been on so far?
Yeah, you know, in those questions and those points, you know, I support those things and I strongly support them. But what's even better than me supporting it is, do we support it, right? How do we as a collective together, right? Something I try to emphasize all the time is that a movement is not an individual. And what really changes things is people coming together in power, right? People coming and becoming a member of the African Black Coalition, people coming together and becoming a member of the NAACP. You know, membership is power, collectiveness is power. And so really thinking about the community when it comes to those things, you know, I think that people are ready for this. People, right, we saw in the pandemic, right? I never seen this before, personally in my own life, but people were able to get stimulus checks, right? People printed money and gave money because people were in trouble, people were in danger, and people needed it. And so there's still an opportunity for people to make that happen, right? People are able to do stuff. There's been so much happening for other people. People have gotten, these big companies and corporations have gotten tax breaks. Why can't we? Why can't we, right? Again, it's about time, right? Our people are owed, and this thing, our people are owed so much more. Our people are owed so much more than we're asking for, right? We are literally asking for the minimum amount necessary for us to start to see a change, right? So many people are still going to be affected by, you know, the vials of police brutality, and all the evils that plague our community. But we're asking for a chance. We're asking for an opportunity. And what's going to happen is at a certain point, we're going to stop asking and we're going to start taking.
Come on now. You know, absolutely, absolutely. And this also makes me think about things that have happened, right, in regards to reparations wins and things that, you know, certain campaigns have, you know, won for reparations, or even just some things that are happening in Chicago that I've mentioned earlier, and I kind of want to bring those back up. So I'm not sure if you've heard, or, you know, I'm sure that you have, of what's going on in Chicago as of last year. There has been some work within the inner cities out there, and they're talking about providing reparations, financial, you know, checks to those who have been impacted by, you know, the impact and things of that nature in Chicago. They're addressing it in regards to checks, right? But, you know, being that earlier we talked about how allocating reparations may not necessarily always look like a check. How do you, you know, how do you kind of view the resources being allocated to us in regards to reparations, right? Because checks can be one thing, but again, if we don't have financial literacy, it may just get blown away. Then it's like, what do we do with this money, right? So I kind of wanted you to, if you can, elaborate on that, and what you know think about these things so far.
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways to look at this. This researcher, Luke, I think his name is Luke, what's his name? Luke Frederick. I'll send you his work. He talks a lot about this. He did some studies at Georgetown. And Georgetown, if you, I don't know if you heard about this, this was a couple of years back, they started basically a reparation program where they added a fee to the student fees to lessen the cost for Black students, right? And that is a very real way that you can actually do things. You know, I know there's a lot of conversations about, you know, racist statues and racist buildings and people renaming stuff, which is great. I agree. Like, let's tear it down. Let's make sure we take it away. But oftentimes that can be a very performative way for an institution to make a change, right? It really comes down to the dollars and cents, right? If you're an institution who has a large endowment, why don't you partner with an HBCU to help and support them, right? How do you make sure that you are using your privilege to step in the gap for others? And so that's really what it's about. It's like, we know that these financial institutions and things, and we don't want to be dependent on anybody, because when we're dependent on people, we become open for attack and for regression. But recognizing that there is an opportunity for these institutions to make right and to provide financial aid, to provide more scholarships, right? There are several free college programs throughout the United States, but they only benefit white women because there's so many restrictions that limit Black people, right? You provide free college, and you're talking about diversity and inclusion and keeping Black people in college. You need to make sure that the restrictions and the policies on it don't exclude Black people, right? And so it's really about reframing the mindset, and it really comes back to who's writing the rules, right? Because it's not people like you and me. It's people who believe they understand what's best for our community, but don't come from our community, don't step in for the community, or only come into our community like 2-3 weeks before an election as like, vote for me. We really need to make sure that the people who are in power are people who have, I'm gonna circle back again, who have that political education, who have that political mindset, who understand the basic needs for our community and what needs to happen, and are empowered to do so. And even when they're empowered to do so, are kept accountable by the people that they serve every day. The last thing I'll say on this is like, something that I constantly think about and is my guiding North Star is when I make any decision, right? Because of the people who developed me to become who I am, I'm like, what are these people going to think when I make the decision? Because I know that they trained me, and without them, without my community, without ABC, I wouldn't be who I am today. And so we really need to make sure that the people in power who are making those decisions, people in these institutions, have that knowledge and are able to make the right decisions. And there's so many plethora of ways to do it. We're making it up for you and giving it to you. Y'all not even thinking about it. Y'all need to just pick one, choose it, run with it, and make sure that we're the ones who are in charge of the dispersal.
Okay, make sure that we're the ones that are in charge of the dispersal, right? Very, very key. And I am because we are, right? Like you making sure that you emphasize that this is not an individual's fight, or this is not an individual's duty to do to gain us reparations, right? Not even one organization. This is a collaborative effort that has already been, a continuous train that we're writing, right? We're not just getting on and starting this new fight for pushing for reparations. We are adding to this fight. So I really appreciate you bringing the collectiveness of the struggle that we're currently facing with that. And so real quick, we're kind of, getting down to our last couple of questions, but, we of course have to address, the state of imprisonment, incarceration, and, talk about that in regards to reparations. So I do want to bring that into the conversation. And, with the knowledge that you have gained and the things that you understand about like the statistics financially, how do reparations intersect with the current state of Black people's relationship to the prison industrial complex in the U.S. in regards to things such as like post-prison fees or building economic stability after incarceration? So can you kind of talk about like what kind of reparations, can we think about in regards to that particular problem?
Yeah, it's deep. Back in 2016, 2017, I used to teach up at San Quentin Prison. I was a high school teacher teaching math, science, and African studies. But at night, I go to San Quentin Prison and teach a GED math class. And I'd go in there every Tuesday night, see the brothers, talk with them, dap them up. They would give me so much game and knowledge. And it was kind of funny because I'd be teaching high school freshmen to sophomore, and they'd be like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. And I'd go up to San Quentin, and they'd be like, wisdom, like, challenge me, give me more, because they craved that knowledge. They recognized how limited it was, right? I would literally like sneak books in there to give it to them because they craved the knowledge, the understanding, and wanting to do better for themselves. And many of them did. Many of them, got like computer science degrees, got math degrees, passed their GED, things of that nature. But the second that they got out, they had no access to the jobs and the wealth, even with the knowledge, right? Even with the understanding and the certificates, right? You still do not have access to the wealth that is out there, right? You can be, the Bay Area, tech capital of the world, right? A place where people go all the time just to build that wealth because there's so much wealth there. Folks still don't have access post-incarceration, right? And so recognizing that there's so many barriers for people who are also falsely incarcerated, who have stories that are not being told, who have stories that are being overlooked, right, are just cast aside in society. And so I think it's especially important that we really think through, one, how we are supporting folks as they re-enter, if they're direct access. A really great podcast to listen to is called Ear Hustle. It's amazing, Black men who are literally recording their podcast from prison, and talking about the things that are affecting them, but thinking about what are direct access programs that we can do to ensure that these fees and deans are mitigated. Right? I really believe that like somebody else needs to pay for that. Like they don't need to pay for that. Like they've done the work, they've done the time, and there's a bigger system, right? Because it's structural, it's deep, right? We know that people base the amount of prison beds based off of, like a third grader or second grader's like, reading score or something. These things are implanted in our community, and there's a direct attack and assault on our people. And so if the government is, and that's why I said, like, even the reason why they're not doing it, it's purposeful, right? The Black people getting wealth, getting opportunities, like change our reality. And so nothing is done by accident, right? Nothing is done because it wasn't meant to be done, right? Everything is purposeful, and we have to recognize the lies that we've been told, but also recognize the power that we have to change it. Because the more of us that are doing this work, the more of us that are actually pushing solidarity, like the fact that every single day, right, people are saying student debt, the fact that when Elizabeth Warren thinks about the NAACP and student debt, she thinks Wisdom Cole and thinks my name, right? There are an army of people behind me who I know who support me, who are pushing for this as well, and I got to represent them well. And so, I really believe, it's about time to make things happen. So, I'm glad to be in community with you and solidarity with you, and working for a better future.
Absolutely. It's about time. You know what I'm saying? It's about time. That's a theme, you know what I'm saying? Not just a theme, but that's the call, that we have to continue out when we're not asking for reparations, when we're demanding, right, reparations, because it's not a matter of, we're not asking for anything. We're asking for y'all to have some common sense, like, you know what I mean? So, thank you for bringing that into the conversation. And also, I do want to touch on, this bill that had passed in California recently, in 2020, and Gavin Newsom actually signed the Families Over Fees Act into law, which pretty much was a law that was supposed to end the collection of 23 fines and fees imposed on people's debt after being released from prison, eliminating supposedly over 16 billion in outstanding criminal fees, most of them which the judge deemed unpayable. So this is for a lot of people a big thing, right, for this bill to be passed. However, we do understand that, and as you said, we have to think about accountability, right? And in regards to even those that are pushing for these things to happen. So while we may have advocates of this Families Over Fees Act, while we also have to continuously do check-ins, like, okay, has this been put into effect, right? Because when things get put into office or when they get placed, it may get signed, but how fast is the process for this to be implemented? So if you happen to know a little bit of information about this Family Over Fees Act, or do you kind of see this as a way forward, or some way of like a form of reparations, or do you see this kind of just as this is a band-aid over a bullet wound type of thing? Like, we're not really, not really help. Like, can you kind of elaborate on your thoughts about this act?
I personally got to dive more into legislation, but I have been hearing, keeping my ears to the street, because California is my home, the West Coast, best coast, and I'm always invested in the future of Black people in California. One day I'm gonna move back. I keep saying that, but it's actually gonna happen. I'm gonna be back out there. So I'm gonna holler at you. I'll see you soon. But I really think that there are, like, we do have, like, politics is a relationship, right? Any type of thing is making sure that you are keeping people accountable, making sure that things are implemented, right? If we are saying that we believe that we are supporting families versus fees, like, an example to kind of connect to Families Over Fees is during the pandemic, collection calls were supposed to stop, right? For people who were in default loans or delinquency, you have the people calling for collection saying, hey, you owe money, pay us our money back, blah, 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 blah. They were supposed to stop doing collections. So many people were still getting collection calls during the pandemic, even though they weren't able to go to work, even though they lost their jobs. And so just because something is said, something is passed in policy, there has to be structures to ensure that it actually goes through. But there also has to be even more policy to re-strengthen it. So I know that there are committees of people led by dope organizers that I know throughout the state of California who are actually working on real reparations in the state. And so what they're doing is making sure that there's research, that they're examining all these different legislations and bills, and making sure that it actually doesn't just impact today, but it's good for tomorrow, right? What's really important about policy is longevity, because you can implement something and effect tomorrow, and then the next month or the next week or the next year is done, it's out. And so it's really about making sure there's policy that lasts the duration, the longevity of our community, because we're not only fighting for ourselves, we're fighting for the future freedom fighters to come.
Right. Absolutely. And it's about bridging that gap, right? Because there may be some, young folks and that come up and don't really even understand reparations or why are we even fighting for this? Like, this was my grandma's short, right? We hear, young folks, because they just may not understand the historical analysis of reparations or the historical context of it. They don't know why exactly we're fighting for it today. However, like you said, this work is not just for now, but for the future freedom fighters that come, because we know this is going to, even though right now there's been a lot of different wins and a lot of different actions that have been made, the fight is clearly not over, which is why we have to have these conversations, like this, to really address, student loan debt, to address, all the different debts, credit card debt, and all these other forms of reparations that, we are demanding. So, I really appreciate you just talking about the Family Order Fees Act, bringing your thoughts and your education, your wisdom, into the conversation. Very much appreciated. And with that, do you really have any last words about just work that you guys are doing at NAACP, or like ways people can get involved with this work, book recommendations, just kind of anything that you want to leave us with today? You've said so much, I want you to kind of take us home real quick.
Most definitely. Well, one, I appreciate this conversation. I appreciate the invitation. I love the African Black Coalition, fundamental political education, grassroots, really building Black students at all levels, and really thinking how deep this work is, right? Just to give you a little backstory, right? You think about the institutions of power that people look at, the Ivy Leagues, the Princeton, the Harvard, the Dartmouth, all those kind of places. The first 9 presidents at Princeton University owned slaves. The person who was the physician for, I believe, the Dartmouth College president literally boiled the body of a Black slave to have a skeleton anatomical structure, right? Just for demonstration, right? Mm. So our bodies have been used, our bodies have been built upon, right? This has been going on for way too long. And one thing that we're seeing right now, and one thing that I'm actually going to be trying to push these culture magazines and culture people on, is the Biden administration is really trying to go on a victory tour and say, hey, we've canceled, $1.85 billion in student debt, right? When we look at the amount of that, that's like less than 1% of the debt, right? Yes, it's great. You remember those ITT Tech commercials? Those ones like you sitting on your couch, you ain't doing anything.
I pass you by.
Yeah, exactly. You remember that? Hey, those were some people who were defrauded by those schools, getting bad education, and they got their debt canceled. Amazing. A lot of those people were our people, which is amazing. I love that. Veterans, people who are disabled, right? We're seeing it happen a little bit by little bit, but that's also because we've been pushing for it. But also it's because we've been overdue to get that. And so there's still so much debt out there. We have to make sure to recognize that, hey, widespread cancellation, making sure that a minimum of 50,000 or more is canceled, making sure that we end interest, right? Making sure that, there's this thing called the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, where these programs that they put us in after we graduate from college, not a lot of people are actually finishing them and getting their debt canceled. And so if these programs are put in place, let's actually reform them and make sure they help us. Rather than 10 years, 3 years, right? There has to be real access, real opportunity, real power for us to make a difference. And I really think it's about time that people use their power to change things. And so the last thing I'll leave you with is, if you are interested in getting involved, we have a campaign called the 50K and Beyond campaign. We're looking for organizers. We're looking for people who are ready to mobilize. We're looking for people who are down to launch petition campaigns, down to pass resolutions, down to share their story, right? We want to record your story, share your story, advocate it, push it out there, make sure that we're consistently keeping this drumbeat of student debt cancellation, right? Because if we continue doing it, we continue yelling, shouting, screaming, advocating, organizing, getting into the places of power, and making sure that our voices are heard, but making sure they deliver on promises and have a sustainable plan, maybe, just maybe, we'll see a better future. So I'm super excited. Definitely follow our work at NAACP YC_, or go to naacp.org. We have a phenomenal action center that our comms team put together where you could, if you're looking to take action in anything, student debt cancellation to voting rights to, police accountability, whatever it is, right? You can find it there. Quick, easy ways to take action, but also ways to build power. If you are not a member of the African Black Coalition, become a member of the African Black Coalition. If you're not a member of the NAACP, become a member of the NAACP. Become a member, right? Join, organize. This is an amazing community to be a part of because we are building a better future. And when you look back at history, what side do you want to be on?
Literally, it's that simple. Thank you so much, Wisdom, again. And just last word for me. And I did want to bring this up. A student had put it in the chat, but they also, have brought up the fact of political prisoners, and I did want to address that because ABC is very, very, adamant about making sure we talk about what the situation between political prisoners, right, in the state, and that is also a conversation that we'll dive deeper into in another part of our series about in regards to reparations. But we do have to make sure that we're continuously always fighting for the freedom of all of our political prisoners, period, right? This is the necessity of when we're talking about the relationship between prison and reparations, right? One of the fundamental aspects of it, because how is it that we're going to even talk about post-prison debt and fees when we have people literally years, over decades in prison, right? Solitary confinement, Albert Woodfox, Sundiata Akoli, Jalil Monte. There's just so, right? So I did want to just end that, making sure that we acknowledge the freedom of all political prisoners. And with that being said, again, Wisdom, we thank you so much. Everybody that's watching, we thank you so much for tapping in. Please make sure you follow Wisdom. Please make sure you follow the NAACP if you want to get involved in any of the work. Again, the website is in the chat.
Shout out to I see my brother Taharka in here. I see my brother Superstar Student here. Like, I'm seeing all these people who do amazing work, make amazing art, and do dope stuff. And so, again, happy to be a part of this community.
Absolutely, yes. And we see you, Taharka. Shout out Jada. Everybody in here, we love you guys. We appreciate you guys so much. And if you want to stay tapped in, keep on watching what we're doing with ABC and Wisdom. Keep following his work, and we'll make sure to get you guys tapped in anything that we're doing in regard.
Words of Wisdom 27.
Words of Wisdom 27, y'all. Don't forget, Adam, right after this, don't leave without making sure you tap in with our brother, okay?
Tap into the culture. I love it.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you, Wisdom. We will talk soon. And thank you guys so much for tapping in. We'll see you at the next reparation series. Make sure to watch the last one that we had on our ABC YouTube page. And you can go back and watch this one as soon as we finish with this conversation today. So much love, y'all.
Peace, my sister. I'll talk to you soon.
Yes, indeed. Peace, y'all.